Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this Saturday for our Facebook Live special guest. I'm here with my close friend and work colleague, Peter Marks. Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Christian. Hello, everyone.
And why don't you go ahead and introduce our very special guest today. We're excited to have him with us.
Oh, we're really excited. This is not only a great winemaker, master of wine, but a true friend, Bob Betz.
Hello. I lost the animation here.
Looks like Peter froze up here. So let's. Well, Bob, welcome. Oh, here he is. Peter's back.
Sorry about that.
We lost you there, Peter. But
yeah,
thank you for the welcome.
Go ahead again, Peter.
I was so effusive in my introduction. I guess I got too excited, but I wanted to welcome not only a great friend, an amazing winemaker, and a fantastic master of wine, Bob Betz, who's the founder of Betz Family Winery and also a consulting winemaker today. Welcome, Bob. How are you?
Hey, Peter. Thank you, and thank you to all of you listening out there. What a treat for me to be involved with a program of the wonderful work that the Napa Valley Wine Academy does. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And where are you coming from today, Bob? Are you obviously sheltered in place somewhere nice?
We are quarantining in a little beach house on an island in the San Juans. It's an archipelago, about 700 islands up in Washington State in Puget Sound. And we got a little house here we've had for almost 3 decades now, just on the beach where we crab, we boat, we do a little fishing, and just a little bit of quarantining right now.
Nice. And you look like you got a little sun. So I'm assuming there's been some sunlight up there, not just all rain, right?
There has been good sunlight, good sunshine. Yesterday for here, it was pretty warm. It was in the mid to upper 70s, and that's really warm here. Unfortunately, this morning about 9 o'clock, thunder, lightning, and rain. It was a big storm system that moved up from Oregon through Washington, and we've been having thunder and lightning. The computer went out 3 times on me. So if I lose you, I'll be back.
We pray not.
Okay,
we pray not. Well, let's.
Exactly.
I'd love to let everybody know about your wonderful background. So to begin, what was it that prompted you to become a winemaker?
Not getting into medical school. I had, for the first 20 some years of my life, I thought I was going to be a physician, and I graduated university, good grades, honors program, all that stuff. I didn't get in 1970. So my wife and I took off and spent a year in the vineyards of Western Europe, and that was the glue that put together our entire future. It was the stimulus to have been at Lafitte and Mouton and Yquem and Krug and Bollinger and great estates in Italy and Spain, in Germany. And so that was the course of the rest of our life. We sort of cut our teeth on European wine during that year. My wife had already lived in Europe for a year before I met her, so the impetus to go back was immediate. And I had been there before with a buddy, and this year in Europe changed the direction of our lives.
And so you came home and
I came home and jumped into the wine business. Within a number of months, I was hired by Saint Michel in a number of roles. Actually, I spent 28 years at the Saint Michel Wine Estates, is what it's called now, working with them on projects mostly in Washington, but also in California, where when I was with them, they owned Villa Mount Eden and Con Creek wineries, worked on projects there, was part of the founding of both Eroica and Colsolare. Eroica is a joint venture with Ernie Lozen from the Mosel, and of course, Colsolare is a joint venture with the Antinori family from Tuscany. And those two were a return to my roots, so to speak, and such a great experience of really taking the lessons we had learned already in Washington, but putting an international twist to them for both white and red varieties. And it was a major step for me personally, and I think for the company as well. So it was a great background. It was the kind of background that over the 28 years I was there, I was able to work with most every department except finance. It's not my strength. I'm married to a very bright financial whiz.
There you go.
But yeah, worked vineyards and winemaking and sales for a while, and did a lot of education training, of course, translating what we did in the cellar and what we did in the vineyards in Washington to retailers and restaurateurs and distributors across the country and in Europe. Yeah. So it was great. You know, we had a lot of challenges back then. I started with the company at Saint Michel and worked with them until I retired in 2003. We already had Betz family for a number of years by then. But if you think of the world, this world that we were living in 1975, Washington, for most wine lovers everywhere globally, even Washington State, there was this belief of north cold and wet, and how can you grow grapes successfully when you have to deal with those challenges. So we challenged conventional wisdom. We would ask people, you know, in presentations, in literature, etc., which wine district is warmer, Odessa, Russia, or Bordeaux, France? And of course, the conventional wisdom says Bordeaux is warmer, but in fact, Odessa is warmer. And there were a number of those misinformation pieces that we would ask them. And I love the one where we asked which city is farther north, Naples, Italy, or New York, New York. And of course, New York was everyone's response. And in fact, Naples is farther north than New York City. So we set the stage for challenging conventional wisdom. And over the course of the last 45 years, I've been part of a team of people, winemakers and growers and salespeople who have tried to change the globe's mind about growing grapes in Washington. We've been somewhat successful.
Yeah.
So
and during that time, did you have any mentors that influenced you in any way?
I had the great pleasure, honor. It was really a fundamental issue for me. Andrei Chelichev, who was still employed at Beaulieu Vineyards, had been consulting with Saint Michel, the Chateau Saint Michel at the time that I joined, and was a consultant with them from probably 67 through 1990. And so for a great deal of my career there, I literally sat at his elbow and listened and talked and tasted. 2 weeks on the job, we began tasting the 1975, it was late 1975, early 76. 2 weeks on the job, he came up for 3 days and he changed my life. And over the years, his perspective on not only what we're doing in Washington, but what happens globally, what happens in California, of course, for our brands there, and a way of looking at winemaking and grape growing had an enormous influence on me. He also was the one who told Piero Antinori, you need to see what's happening in Washington State. Piero has told this story several times, and it eventually led to Piero coming and visiting us in the early 90s and us creating this joint venture of Col Solare, which is a brand and a winery and vineyards all to itself within the Saint Michel umbrella.
Wow. Well, you know, and I got to say, your story reminds me so much of my college roommate, Rob Davis, who worked at Jordan Winery right after he graduated. He was also a pre-med student when we started at Davis and switched to winemaking like you, and was mentored and truly felt Andre was a huge influence and impact on his career.
How lucky are we?
Yeah, I know. And you hear the story about Andre from so many people, and I don't know if young people today know much about Andre, but you should read the book. You should see the movie Andre that is currently available. I think it's on Netflix or any type of any one of those movie options you can have. But truly a great man. And I wanted to ask you. Go ahead.
He just bottom line, you know, his influence was not only felt at the time, but continues to be felt and will continue to be felt for hopefully winemaker generations to come. His not just the sheer work that he did, but his way of looking at it all. It was pretty remarkable. So.
Yeah, you talk about a spirit being alive. I think anybody who worked with Andre, I think they believe that's still with them.
For sure, for sure. I
What-
hear that
what-
voice now and then.
And what was it that prompted you to pursue the Master of Wine title?
It was the next logical step. I had, by the early 90s, I had been in the industry for 15, 16 years. And it was, for me, the next logical step. I didn't have a degree from Davis or from Fresno State or Cal Poly or anything like that. And I really wanted to sharpen the skills. But I did it with an eye towards a more pan view of the industry. And as I began investigating, I realized that not only is 60% of the MW curriculum focused on grape growing and winemaking, but the other 40% is focused on issues, culture, sales, marketing, the whole gamut of things. And for my personal quest, it was a much more valuable degree to follow than taking a couple more years off and finishing up a viticulture or enology degree at Davis. And to me, that was the real impetus. I wanted that next professional step, educational step, and the MW offered that to me. And as I look back, of course, and you, Peter, have got to feel the same. It's one of those very few powerful seminal moments in your life when you pass the exam. And it's not just passing the exam that was so profound for me, but it's what I acquired in the process, what I learned and put on in terms of a perspective of wine, vineyards, winemaking, wine sales. And it really was, I must say, for me, the curriculum that we had to study for the MW was such a powerful influence in my wife and I eventually starting our own winery.
Yeah, and one of the things that is true, you've been mentored by many people, and I know that you are a great mentor in your own right. I've students who have learned from you, and I've seen you in action. You're a great teacher. You still can carry a lot of influence in the world of wine. I know so many people look up to you. I do, and even during the MW exam, you won the Villa Maria Award for the best viticulture paper. You also earned the Robert Mondavi Winery Award for the best overall theory. So you kind of know your stuff pretty well, don't you there? At least on the theory side.
It's interesting that you say this, but I feel I was never as sharp as I was the day I passed the exams. Yeah. Okay, because you had this razor edge for getting through the exams, and it was all very, very fresh in your minds. I just got a note that said my internet connection is unstable. Do you still have me?
Yeah, you've cut in and out a little bit, a couple times, but I think you're still.
Yeah,
alive.
I can still hear some rumblings of the thunder out in the distance. So I hope we don't lose each other. But the MW must be a lot like finishing your degree in medicine. Once you finish your degree and get accepted to a residency program, you learn more and more about less and less. Okay, right. Your field narrows. An orthopedic surgeon probably couldn't cure your dry skin, but he sure could cure your hip joint, And I think the same is true with the MW. All of us eventually in our roles get more fine-tuned and honed, applying those lessons from the MW curriculum to what we're doing in our daily life. And for me, it's been viticulture and vinification that has been the greatest learning curve, and that we still pursue today. And it gives you ways, the MW gives me ways of investigating what is happening in the world viticulturally, and how do I apply that to what we're doing in our vineyards and in our cellar.
And today you're still consulting. Can you share some of the places you're consulting at?
You bet. Most of my work is with Betz family, even though we sold the winery in 2011, and we can get back to that topic in a few minutes. I retained the title of winemaker for 5 years. Just very realistically, my wife and I carried the notes for 5 years, the payment notes from the buyers, and I wanted to make sure that we were paid. So I stayed on as winemaker for 5 years, and still consult there today on a frequent basis. I've been there every week since quarantining, just about, safely distanced. Okay, we're all in good space and everything, but my work there is mostly sensory and blending. A very talented young man who was our Betz family winery intern in 2010, worked for DeLille Cellars in Washington for a couple of years, and then came back as our assistant winemaker in 13, I think it was, and worked alongside me. And he's now got the reins as winemaker and has made fabulous improvements in what we were doing. He's a terrific young man, and will carry this mantra, this torch, this goal of Betz family for years to come. I also do something with Col Solare. A number of years ago, the folks at Saint Michel and Antinori asked if I could come back and help work on the wines a little bit, and very pleased with what's happening there. The vineyard team is terrific. The cellar team is very focused on a very limited number of tons, cases, barrels, and that limit gives them an opportunity to really be precise. And if I can mention the Wine Advocate, the recent ratings for the wines were up between 97 and 98 points. So things are happening at Col Solare. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
I
and
do
for
some work
those
for
of you who
some
don't know, can you tell everybody what Col Solare is for those who may not know what type of wine is that?
Sure. Col Solare is a joint venture between the Antinori family, literally, and Chateau Saint Michel that we started in 1995. It is red wine only. It has its own dedicated winery on within the Red Mountain appellation, and 100% of its vines, 100% of Col Solare's estate vines are adjacent to the winery, very much like a classic Burgundian house or a Bordeaux house where the chateau is surrounded by vineyards. Then there are a couple of other local growers on Red Mountain within the AVA that we get grapes from, and then they make the estate Col Solare, 100% Cabernet in most recent years, and a couple of other wines that are collector or for the mailing list and stuff. But it's really focused on one wine, Col Solare. It is not Sangiovese, okay? Mm-hmm. It always was Cabernet Sauvignon, and over the years, because of the Antinori interest, we tried a little Sangiovese, and didn't help. Okay, Washington Sangiovese. Well, let me say this: I've never had Sangiovese as great as I've had from Tuscany anywhere, even within Italy. And so it's never made the cut. But a little Merlot, a little Petit Verdot will find its way. A little Cabernet Franc will find its way into the blend. Terrific stuff. I do a little consulting for some of the trade groups. I've worked a little bit with our friends making wine in Idaho, and some remarkable things are happening there today in the vineyard and the cellar. In ways I look at it as Washington 30 or 40 years ago, a very enthusiastic, just multi-dimensional discoveries going on all at the same time, both in the vineyards and in the cellar in Idaho. Do some work for some of the consortiums within Washington and a couple of private clients in Washington other than those, and have done a little work in the Okanagan, a little work in California, but it's really the Northwest where I've focused my attention.
Now, you started Betz Winery just about the time you were also finishing up your Master of Wine. How did you balance the two of those challenges?
Just like you don't sleep. Okay, when you're studying for the MW exam, you've got to give up something. We had two young daughters. Actually, by that time, the kids were in college and just out of college, so they weren't that young. It was, yeah, that's right. I'm going back. So we had a little more time to ourselves, but like you, I gave up sleep and studied for the MW before work, went to Betz family and did punch downs at 5:30 a.m. and showered and got to Saint Michel by 8 o'clock, and about 6 o'clock left Saint Michel, did punch downs and measurements at Betz family.
Wow.
And then went home crashed and got up the next morning and did it the same way. It was a hard 6 years when I was employed at Saint Michel and did Betz family, but we kept the case totals very low. We had, let's see, probably 150 to 250 cases for about 4 years. And then we ramped it up to about 400 cases, but very limited amount. 100% of it went to the mailing list, and a couple of key restaurants and retailers in Washington kept it very manageable. And were able to survive that crossover of time. It was not easy.
Yeah. What's the best wine you've ever made? And is it still available?
Geez.
Can I still buy it, or anybody?
No, Peter, it's like children, who's your favorite child? We made, at Betz family, we made and still only make red wine. And it's both Northern Rhone and a little bit of Southern Rhone red grapes, as well as Bordeaux red grapes. I gotta say that I think Washington's greatest red variety is Cabernet Sauvignon. It's why we got into the business at Betz family in the first place, to make great Cabernet Sauvignon. And I still think that's true. And the 2005 or 2012 vintages were such that we made only 2 vintages in the last 21 years. We have made a wine called Le Perrin, or the Godfather in French, the family theme to keeping things within the family. And I think those 2 wines, for my palate, were probably the 2 best wines I've ever made. Yeah, I've got to say. Now, it's not to say there won't be other things in the future. Washington, despite being in this now for 55, 65 years of growing vinifera seriously, commercially, the terrain is changing. I'm seeing the evolution of Petit Verdot as a variety in Washington as extremely exciting. We have a couple of vineyards at Betz family that we deal with. They're not estate vineyards. They are purchased vines and purchased grapes, excuse me. Petit Verdot is a very strong performer here. Color of the black as night, richness, mishandled and overcropped, it can get that rustic character that Petit Verdot can take on. But when we limit the tonnage, very low yields, and caress each cluster, it can make an extraordinary wine. We had a very famous critic who will go unnamed. This would have been back in 2012, in fact, who we tasted the 12 vintage out of barrel with him. He said, if you bottle that 1 barrel, 25 cases, I will give you a 100-point score, and I will buy every case that you make.
Wow.
Okay. But that points to the character of what Washington Petit Verdot can be. We didn't do it. We tried it. We tried the blend without the Petit Verdot, and it made a lesser blend. So I apologized, and we made the wine we wanted to make. Okay. And didn't get a 100-point score.
Yeah. So do you see in Washington now many producers making single varietal Petit Verdot, or are they typically using as a blending agent?
Yeah, Peter, they're maybe not as enchanted as I am with the variety. Some are. There are a number of people making a varietal Petit Verdot, but it's not, its tonnage is very limited still. It's very low volume. And it's not, it hasn't caught everyone's fancy. I think you'll find it in blends, Bordeaux blends, of course, but you have to search pretty hard to find them as single variety. Washington is going through some very, very interesting dynamics right now, and it has been. You can imagine the explosion that we had from the early mid-70s to 2020. It's been an extraordinary pathway. Those earliest of years, we had, about 10 wineries in the state. And there were, let's see, in 1975, if I can remember correctly, I think there were maybe 12 wineries and maximum 1,200 acres of vines. Today in Washington, we have about 58 59,000 acres of classic varietal grapevines planted, and we're harvesting somewhere in that 250 to 270,000 tons a year, and vinified by just about 1,000 wineries. It's a remarkable growth of what's happened. It's taken on that critical mass that finally you see more than Saint Michel or Columbia Crest on the shelves in supermarkets or restaurant lists in New York or Miami or Dallas, Chicago, whatever. It's very exciting to see it happening. One of the greatest things that's happened in the last 5 years for Washington is the expansion of Washington State University's viticulture and winemaking research program, to the extent that the industry funded itself to produce a multi-million-dollar research center associated and run by Washington State University right within the vineyards, offering a series of degrees that are producing the next growers and winemakers for the state, for the world, actually. And the work they're turning out is really fabulous. I've been to Davis and Cornell and seen their research facilities. Washington State University's matches or surpasses what they're doing there. It's very exciting. Wow. Some of the most telling phenolic research, phenolics being the tannin type structures within wines. Some of the global research is being led by Washington State University. I can't think of, other than maybe pH, the phenolic content of red wines is maybe the second most important factor in what's there. So very exciting. A lot of research being done on smoke taint from forest fires. As you know, in California, up in British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, forest fires are part of our new reality. And a lot of research being done there. Pest management, water, because Washington is not north cold and wet like we talked about earlier. Water is very scarce. I should say rainfall and snowfall in the vineyards is very scarce. Most people think of us as all wet over here in Washington, but that's the western half where we are today, and it's living up to its reputation. But in eastern Washington, we get about 1/4 of the annual rainfall that you get in Napa Valley. Okay, we get between 6 and 9 inches a year in eastern Washington. Not really enough to support vine life, let alone produce a commercial crop. So irrigation is immensely important. And in the world where we all subscribe to an idea of water conservation, some of the foremost research in the world is happening right here. Australia, Israel, some in France, is happening, and Washington is right there with them. So very exciting.
Yeah. So you spent a lot of time in Washington. You mentioned Cabernet, some of the Northern Rhones and Southern Rhone grapes. What other varieties do you think might be appropriate for Washington?
Well, the list of whites, Chardonnay is at Riesling, and then Chardonnay are at the top of the heap. And Riesling is sublime here, and it's got a welcoming home in a number of places. You've got to take this prism of time. We grew all grapes at all places for a long time, and now there's much more vineyard selection, site specificity coming to these varieties. And we're finding that Riesling deserves its proper spot in a couple of places that, some new vineyards that some are cool, some are actually very warm vineyards, but with vine architecture, trellising, canopy management, et cetera, you can accommodate some of the heat because Washington State's warm. The vineyard area is very warm. In the month of July, we actually get heat similar to what you get in Calistoga. Okay, it's pretty darn hot. Yeah, we'll talk in a few minutes about Washington's climatic situation, but what I'm seeing is Riesling really evolving even more than I thought it would from 45, 50 years ago when we were making good Riesling. But today it's precision and its delicacy and its nuance is even better than the kind of strong fruit, apricot, linalool type things that we produced for many years. I love the delicacy that's coming along with so many of them. Chardonnay is finding its way, and there are some sites down in the gorge, which is on the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. But on the Washington side, some of the Chardonnays that are being produced there now have less of volume of fruit, but a greater penetration and delicacy. And I'm a real fan of what's going on there with those. Merlot, of course, has been a much maligned, but much cherished at the same time, great variety. And I love what's happening. Yakima Valley, the Horse Heaven Hills, some on Red Mountain are capable of hitting great heights. Other white varieties, well, some Sauvignon Blanc, some unfortunately Semillon, which doesn't have a huge market out there. I would put Washington State Semillon in the hand of a great winemaker can equal those of what we're seeing out of Australia. Very exciting, but you know, selling a case of Semillon is not an easy thing to do.
Right.
The Syrah, of course, it's a wonderful chameleon here in Washington, as it is globally. And with the range of climatic and soil conditions that Syrah finds itself planted in here in Washington, the gamut of character and flavor and nuance and dimension and smoke and meat and all that stuff is really dramatic in Washington. You go from the Rocks district of Milton Freewater, where you have Cayuse and Rain Van and so many others producing really wonderful Syrah from, has an entirely different profile from that like Betz family produces from the far west end of the Yakima Valley, the oldest Syrah planting in Washington. Meaty, powerful, robust, more Côte Rôtie-ish than Cornas, okay? It doesn't have that nuance of Cornas, but a very robust and powerful representation of the variety. Grenache, Grenache, and probably I would put in the same category Mourvèdre and Counoise as being the best of the Southern Rhone contenders in Washington. They're terrific stuff. Grenache has been planted here actually since the mid-50s and blended into red wines, nondescript red wines, producing 7, 8, 9 tons to the acre, and you'd have to blend it away and produce a really nice rosé out of it. What we're finding is that by limiting the yields on Grenache down to that 2.5 tons, where you've got well over 50% of the fruit on the ground at harvest time, you can make some really terrific Grenache. My current fascination is with Counoise, the last 2 vintages of Counoise that they harvested in Betz family. Fabulous. It's richly colored, richly flavored. The black pepper of Mourvèdre, but the bright and rich raspberry notes that come out of Grenache. So I'm a Counoise fan.
Great.
Those are kind of, to me, the leaders of the pack.
Wow, it sounds like the opportunity to find nuances and different sites and varieties and fine tuning what grows best is still the future of Washington State.
Very much. Site variety marriage has taken a lot of steps forward in the last 30 years, 20 years especially, but we've got so much more that we can do in finding that site variety marriage that really takes us to the echelon we want to be at. It may not happen in my lifetime, but 25, 30 years from now, I think the world will look very differently at Washington State.
Yeah, I'm going to pause for just a moment and ask Christian if there are any questions, or we can at least let everyone know that they can use the chat box to ask questions. I can't see them, so Christian, if you have any, if you wouldn't mind letting us know.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have one coming in here, and a question about, from a winemaker's perspective, which varieties, Bob, do you think can best represent Washington State?
If I had to whittle them way down, Christian, it would be Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah for the reds, Riesling, Semillon, and then selected sites of Chardonnay. would be my top priorities for what represents Washington. And you know, I've probably just angered a lot of my buddy winemakers in Washington State that say, "Well, I make a terrific Sauvignon Blanc and Gewürztraminer and Cabernet Franc," and they do. But for my palate, my pocketbook, those are the varieties I'd invest in. Petit Verdot may be included down the road if my fascination with it becomes a reality, but right now those others are the best.
Okay, and then we have a viewer who's tuning in actually from Austria, and she would like to know, Bob, what do you think about Austrian wines?
Peter posed a question to me back on a list of questions he sent to me saying, if you could make, or something like, if you could make wine anywhere in the world but Washington State, where would you make it? And I, in fact, would make Gruner Veltliner in the Wachau, Sangiovese in Tuscany. I am head over heels with Kremstal, Kamptal, and Wachau Gruner Veltliner. Rieslings as well. They're sublime, but I have such a fascination because it's very difficult to find Gruner Veltliner of the quality level that I find from those three regions. And Wachau may be a little more challenging because it's not quite as warm as the other two areas, but I'll take the challenge because those wines are over the top. At any given time, I've got a couple of cases of working on from a range of producers that I find just exceptional. And I'm still analyzing the evidence, and I will the rest of my life to define who my favorite producer and what favorite vineyard there would be. But I love the wines of Austria and drink a great number of them frequently.
And they're such great values too. I mean, if you look at the the quality commensurate with other wines from around the world, they're incredible bargains.
Absolutely. And age-worthy. Gruner Veltliner, I mean, now, but I've got stuff going back to 13, 11. I had, I think, an 07 not that long ago. It was sailing along famously. Low pH, okay? Low pH in those wines really aids in their ability, the harmony, the expression, and allow nuance to develop more and more over time.
You started to break up, but I think everyone heard your answer there. But good. Okay. You mentioned Sangiovese. You would love to make that in Tuscany. Any particular part of Tuscany, and would it be 100% Sangiovese, or would you blend in some other varieties?
Right now, I think my answer would be 100% Sangiovese, and it would be Chianti Classico.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And would you make it more traditional style in the large botte, or would you use small oak? What would you do with that winemaking?
A combination. Italy is a frequent destination, in fact, except this year. We would have gotten back yesterday from the last 3 weeks in Italy, except for the virus, and it was all focused in Tuscany. So we spent a lot of time in Tuscan vineyards and Tuscan cellars, and my most enjoyable renditions of Sangiovese is a combination of large botte and some berry, but not exclusively either. Okay, time in both. Even some are doing that, and I find those wines a little fresher and not as drying, with that large oval influence. Yeah, I'd be adhering to tradition, maybe a little farther north, north Panzano and north of where I get the grapes from. I like those from down south, etc. But I like the freshness and liveliness of the Sangiovese grown to the north. So,
great.
But the Antinori's haven't offered me a job yet, so.
Not yet. Christians, are there any other questions?
Yeah, so we do have another question, and I know you mentioned this before, Bob, that Idaho was one of the regions you thought was the next up and coming area. Any other regions besides Idaho that you think are the next Washington in the making?
British Columbia, the Okanagan of British Columbia. I've done some consulting up there, obviously some touring, and a lot of tasting. And there are pockets and producers that are capable of delivering a real dazzle. Can't wait for another 10 or 15 years. The investments that they're making in the vineyards, the investments in the cellars, and the talent that they're bringing in, consultants from a global perspective, they're going to see dust and have their influence on a way of looking at their fruit and their winemaking techniques. Very exciting. I think the wines are very good.
Any particular varieties that you would?
But did I lose you?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah. No, I'm able to hear you,
okay.
but so yeah, I was just asking, what are some of the favorite varieties for the Okanagan that you would find?
I missed the question, Peter.
For the Okanagan, what varieties do you think have a good future?
Yeah, I'll go back to Cabernet and Syrah. What I've tasted, dense, rich, low pH, a little lower pH even than Washington at harvest. Their limiting factor, of course, is that first autumn freeze, which is earlier than it is in Washington, earlier than Oregon or California. You got to look at the Okanagan Valley as the extension of the Central Valley in California. It comes right up through Oregon, through Washington, and on up into British Columbia. And you have varying degrees of heat accumulation and daylight hours. What helps us up in these northern climes are these long daylight hours that we get right now. My wife and I were outside last night at 10:15 looking to the west, and we had ample light out. We just get these long daylight hours, and it's even more dramatic in British Columbia, which is a couple degree parallels farther north than we are. Okay, so that helps. But we, as they are, even more so, limited by a shorter growing season. We're pulling fruit off at the end of the growing season. I know that sounds like everyone does that, but no, they don't. I mean, think of your situation in Napa. When you're harvesting Cabernet, you may have another 2, 4, 6 weeks of photosynthetic potential left in your vines. We don't. And especially up in British Columbia, they don't either. Whites from British Columbia, the aromatic whites, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Muscat, I think they can be really, really nice because they have this, they're harvested early, crisp, fresh, vibrant, floral, lively, great pH, great total acidity to them. Those are my favorites. Chardonnay is not my favorite yet. And I say yet because the story is not complete yet. The book is still being written up there. And give them time. They'll find pockets that make it work right.
Good. Well, before we lose you to the weather, I did have one question I wanted to ask, and that is, what is something that people would be surprised to know about you?
Oh man, how many?
Or are you an open book?
Oh yeah, I'm an open book. No secret, I love the industry, and we just comment real quickly. We sold the winery a number of years ago. And our 2 daughters said we love the industry, but my wife and I didn't have a succession plan because they were not going to take it over. So we ended up selling as I aged up here, and barrels are way heavier than they were 5 years ago. Okay. Yeah. That's personally. What else would they not know about me? My college job in the summer times was putting the cream filling in Twinkies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a passion for wood-fired pizza.
I've heard about that.
Yeah, my mother was Neapolitan, and we have been making pizza since I was 3 years old with her. But time in Naples, studying pizza making and building a wood-fired oven in our home was a dramatic change in our life. And just this week, I was back making pizza on that in that oven for Betz family did a little
Oh,
filming
nice.
for Betz.
Great.
We did it live.
Well, I can't
We
wait
zoomed it
till
out.
we can come up and enjoy some of your pizza firsthand.
Good, Peter.
Yeah.
Christian.
So Christian, before we dash off, any other final questions for Bob?
Yeah, there are two final questions that we have, and one is, what do you think about Pinot Noir varieties on the West Coast? Specifically, how do you think they do in the Okanagan Valley?
Pinot Noir is a new breed now. I remember a tasting I went to with Andrei Chelichev, probably of Carneros. They were exclusively Carneros Pinot Noirs in the late 70s. And he had lots of commentary about Pinot Noir. Today, the Pinot Noir that we're getting off the West Coast is a totally different thing. The emergence of so many great areas where site variety marriage, Peter, that you and I talked about earlier, with the emergence of specific sites, not only in Russian River, Alexander Valley, very exciting Pinot Noir coming out of there right now. Santa Lucia Highlands, Lompoc, et cetera, all up and down the coast of California, finding those particular sites that are, I think, doing some really amazing things. And it's not just about volume, it's about detail and precision and elegance and style. That's where Oregon comes in and has done some, once again, I think Oregon Pinot Noir that we're drinking today is such a far cry from what we were drinking in the mid 70s and early 80s. It's not only vineyard discovery, identifying areas, sub-appellations, of which there are many now in Oregon's Willamette Valley, identifying the best, but also a change in techniques of learning how to control yields in the very best of ways in a marginal climate. Washington, there's a little bit of Pinot Noir grown down in the south, close to the Columbia River, which more mimics the Willamette Valley than Washington's Columbia Valley. And there are some things happening. Maybe so. Let's take a look. Let's give them time to ferret out the techniques and the sites. I have not tasted Pinot Noir from Okanagan yet that has been of the dimension and expression that matches. It's not to say it can't happen, just needs a little more work.
Right. And then the final question we have for today's show is, any comment on organic viticulture, specifically in the United States?
Exciting. I find organic viticulture exciting. I find it variable. And so many thoughts go through my mind when I listen to this. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff that is happening in Washington, places like the Rocks, many other vineyards areas as well, I think they're showing great success in cultivating wine under a little bit difficult conditions. Okay, our soil is not nutrient rich. It's not there's so much sand in the soils in eastern Washington that rattlesnakes and sagebrush is what's naturally there. Okay, and supporting organic viticulture is going to take a lot of work, and we'll get there because the efforts are happening, and I see it as being part of the future. The other aspect of that is I have not seen compelling evidence of consumer interest. A lot of people like talking about organic winemaking, but I haven't seen it as a defining gotta have for most consumers. Okay, so I applaud anyone who's doing it. Biodynamic, organic, let's be good stewards of the earth, as good as we can. Integrated pest management is not organic, and it's trying to respect the earth, but when needed, it will intervene. But let's have at least as our goal to be great stewards of the earth and do everything we can to still produce great wine.
Wonderful. Well, Bob, thank you for such a great interview, and hope you're staying well and be well, and all of you. And I have to tell you, just listening to you today has made me so thirsty to open up one of your Betz family wines. So tomorrow's my son's birthday, and I'm going to open up one of your Cabernets because I've got one that's, I think, it's just ready to go. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to our listeners to join us in this wonderful interview, and thank you again.
A great pleasure for me, Peter. Just from my perspective, being part of your culture, Napa Valley Wine Academy, and Peter's incredible work with the Institute of Masters of Wine for education and leadership. I love supporting it. So thank you for all that you guys do. And let me know if we can gather again.
We will. All right.
Okay.
Well,
take care, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
to you both. And a reminder, join us back here on Facebook on Monday, where we'll be doing our weekly Monday Fun Day wine trivia quiz. New format this weekend, this week, I should say. So make sure and tune in on Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Thanks again to both of you. What an honor to have two masters of wine join us today. Everyone out there, stay safe and drink well. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.